This is Talk Business and Politics with Roby Brock.
If he's not off in Europe or in Silicon Valley, he may be spending some time in Cuba. I'm joined by Governor Asa Hutchinson for a conversation on a variety of topics. Governor, welcome and thank you for being here.
Glad to be here.
All right. Before we get into Cuba and some things on healthcare reform, I want to touch very quickly on some late breaking news on Friday afternoon. Judge Wendell Griffin halting 8 death row executions, basically saying that the privacy of the drug manufacturers is an issue in these cases. What's your reaction to it?
I think Judge Griffin said the defendants are entitled to litigate as to the method of execution and the source of the drugs. That's particularly not a surprise that Judge Griffin ruled that way. I think have to have a conversation with the Attorney General's office as to whether there will be an appeal to the Arkansas Supreme Court and the time frame for that. And we'll just see how that litigation progresses. But the important thing to note is that none of this would have happened had we not set the execution dates and raised the issue, and it makes people make decisions.
Will you push for a quick appeal?
We'll talk to the AG's office. I think the first question is what's appropriate. I think there is time for an appeal there, but I want to listen to their legal counsel on what's the best time to have this considered by the Supreme Court.
You may give me the same answer again, but is there a problem with that secrecy law, do you think? Do you think it needs to be changed somehow?
No, I think it's very appropriate. The confidentiality of that is important. It's reasonable. Their argument is, well, there was some agreement in the past that would be disclosed, but I think the law is clear, and the law is what governs, and that is the confidentiality is important.
All right, let's move on and talk about your Cuba trade mission here. You're back a little more than a week, I would say. What were your impressions of Cuba? You probably had some preconceived notions, and then there was the reality of actually being there. Give me kind of your general synopsis.
Well, everybody told me it would be a throwback to the 50s, and it was, and I was thinking of that in terms of their development and their old cars, but actually it was a throwback to the 50s in terms of the dialogue with the government officials. They are still in their mindset, the senior officials back in the revolution, back in the centralized government, and that's really struck me that while we need to make progress on loosening the economic sanctions and the embargo, they also need to make improvements in working with the private sector that will encourage investment there. So it's a two-step process, and we've got to see progress by the Cuban government in terms of understanding what it means to utilize the private sector, encourage investment there, and that's going to be a key.
And you are urging caution on some of this, and it is going to take a while. There will have to be some things happen at the federal level for things to open up in a large way that could benefit Arkansas, particularly agriculture. Is there anything that can happen in the short term, do you think?
Well, Congress has got to address it, but I think on the executive side, I know while I was there, the FAA and the TSA, that govern our commercial flights and the security of those flights, are looking for ways to increase regular commercial service to Cuba. And once that happens, there will be more visitors there, which means additional spending on tourism that encourages investment. It helps their startup of the people there in terms of their economy. So I think that's the first step. Congress then needs to loosen the credit restrictions. We can sell rice, but we can't sell it on credit. Brazil can sell it on credit. Puts it as a disadvantage.
All right, so this week, Congressman Rick Crawford from the 1st Congressional District co-sponsor on a bill to basically move cautiously on opening up some of those restrictions that you talked about. Do you support the Crawford bill? Have you talked to him? Is he moving in the right pace?
Absolutely, and I talked to him before his bill was filed. I knew that it was coming, and we're really on the same wavelength in terms of what needs to be done. There's some people say, well, just lift all of the sanctions, lift the embargo immediately. I think it needs to be a step-by-step process, but we need to move quickly on those first two steps, loosening travel restrictions, increasing credit.
Do you think it needs to move slowly because you need to see more democratic reform for you to be comfortable with opening up relations?
They need to have a better working relationship with the private sector, and we need to see the reality on the ground as to what they intend to do and how they're going to treat private investment. But let's open it up for the agricultural sales, and we're going to learn a lot.
What is next on your agenda with Cuba? What do you want to see happen next? What have you given instructions to AEDC or Wes Ward over at the Department of Agriculture?
Well, I mean, they're going to follow up one-to-one on business contacts in Cuba. And for example, I know the University of Arkansas, is looking at perhaps an exchange with the University of Havana. I know that the State Farm Bureau is looking at inviting a delegation in, so they'll follow up on that. From my standpoint, I'd like to talk to my fellow governors and see if there's a consensus on talking to Congress from a governor's perspective that this is important in terms of increasing trade opportunities, loosening some of the sanctions gradually.
All right, let's take a quick break. I want to come back with you and talk healthcare reform. You'll stick around?
Absolutely.
All right, after this quick word from our sponsors, more with Governor Asa Hutchinson. We're back after this. All right, I'm back now with Governor Asa Hutchinson. Governor, let's talk about some health care. This week, the Stephen Group issued their much-anticipated report, 350 plus pages in that report. Kind of what were your general takeaways from the report, maybe the highlights that stuck out to you the most?
Well, first of all, they reaffirmed my statement that it would be really difficult in our economy and our budget to pull back from the private option, to pull back from the federal dollars that come in and support some of our Medicaid system. Secondly, it was very impressive that they really articulated the need for savings to help cover that, and also program integrity. So they really, I was pleased that I had presented 7 elements of reform. The John Selig Group really supported 5 of those key elements. And so from program integrity to savings to work enhancements, I was very pleased with the report, and I think it'll provide a strong framework combined with my comments for the legislature to take action.
So 5 of the 7, they were only wrong on two occasions, is that what you're saying?
Well, we could work through those.
All right. I think one of the big things that stood out to me was one of the more sensational aspects of the report that talked about the out-of-state people that were on the Medicaid rolls, dead people were on the Medicaid rolls. I'm not sure if we have proof that they were actually receiving benefits, but that has to have occurred some, with as many as 16% of the Medicaid population in there. How do you fix that situation?
Well, first of all, you go back to what we've been doing over the last 3 or 4 months in terms of verifying the eligibility of those that are receiving Medicaid benefits. We were sending out 10-day notice letters. We were not getting responses from some people, and all of a sudden we understand why. Tens of thousands of them have out-of-state addresses. And so while we were...
So were you sending the notices to the wrong people, you think? I mean, to the wrong address?
Well, it could have been to the wrong address, but the point is that they were not providing information, and there could be many different stories there, but clearly it points up the absolute need for the program integrity, for making sure we do the eligibility verification. Now, what we've got to do is do it on a rolling basis and not on an annual basis. Right. We've got to develop those systems for it. So I was very pleased that they pointed up those issues. And just as a matter of fact, we are trying to take action. We are taking action from an administration standpoint. We're adding 7 positions to the Program Integrity Office for Medicaid, both through the Inspector General's office and within Program Integrity at DHS. And so we're taking those steps independently, but we need to do more in terms of our reform under the next step of Medicaid reform.
DHS Director John Selig announcing his resignation right after the report came out. It obviously had a lot of pressure on him. He's one of your high-level cabinet appointees there. Did he submit his resignation to you, or did you ask for his resignation?
No, he submitted it. He indicated that he had for some time had looked at going into the private sector. He's 55. He's got some kids going into college down the road. And so whenever he indicated that desire, and I said, I really would like for you to stay on through January. He agreed to do that. And as a governor that's been in office 10 months, I'm really glad that he's helped us through this time. And it's been a good working relationship. And I think we'll be able to finish strong, and we'll have to find somebody that can try to replace him.
So how do you fill that post? Because I think that there is some criticism that the pay is comparatively low compared to somebody with a skill set that could go out in the private sector. What's going to be your search process on this?
Well, the first decision is to see whether there's some people that are handy, that are available here, that meet the needs. And we're going to look first in that vein. And I'm going to look in the private sector for people with business background. The most important thing about a new director of DHS is that they understand business process, they understand managing people, very technical IT projects. And so it's a management experience that I'm looking for. It would be a bonus if they had a background in children's services or youth services and Medicaid, but most importantly, we need someone that understands business management practices. So we'll see what we find. If we don't find someone shortly in that vein, then we'll consider looking at a national search.
All right, I got about 30 seconds left, and so I'm going to hit you with this question. Who do you, you're a former congressman, who do you think the next Speaker of the House will be?
Well, I sure couldn't predict that. It was shocking, actually, the disarray that we see right now. And it's unusual not to have a successor that is ready to move in very quickly. That potential has been diminished. We do need to have someone that has the personality to bring people together. It's very difficult. I noticed that my old colleague, Greg Walden from Oregon, has that type of personality in my judgment. I hope he'll take a look at it.
Give him a phone call. We'll see what's up. Governor Asa Hutchinson, thank you so much. Always a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, Roby.